So my name is Felipe Hoffa. I'm a developer advocate for Google. I've been at Google for 9 years so far, 7 as a developer advocate. First, I was a software engineer, but then I discovered that this is my one true path. And I'm super happy to be in this conference with other DevRel people. And what I really care about, what I love doing is data. So I'm a developer advocate at Google. I love data. I love traveling. I haven't been able to travel much lately. And of course, asking questions. I'm a curious person. That's what data analysis is about. And in this talk, I want to share with you some of my favorite data sets when I'm looking at DevRel. But of course, right now we are going through a global pandemic. A lot of things are changing. And let me show you some of the work I've done related to this. For example, I took all the mobility data that Apple is publishing, and I put it inside BigQuery. BigQuery is my favorite data warehouse. My job is basically to talk about BigQuery. And it's perfect. So I took all of the Apple mobility data, I put it in Data Studio, and now can share dashboards that show, for example, these are the cities that are most staying at home right now in the United States. And you can see that, yeah, in March, there was a big dip, but then the whole United States started going out again. And you can see that the cities that are most staying at home right now are New Orleans, Honolulu, Miami, Phoenix, and San Francisco. But a lot changes through time. This is my way of traveling around the world. Now, I can take all of this data and compress it even more. You can see here the middle chart is, the chart in the middle shows a lot of cities around the US. And you can see that, the one that is the lighter color, that's New Orleans. That's the one that has been the most compliant staying at home. Further up, you can see San Francisco also. But you can see that most of the United States moving to going home. To the left, you can compare with the situation in Europe that went more home than other places. And in the right, you can see Latin America. And this is how I can see that the whole of Latin America is right now staying more at home than the rest of the world, at least in this chart. Probably that's because it's winter right now there. Now, in the darker lines, that's Brazil. Brazil hasn't been good at staying at home. And this will be interesting in a minute because one thing is what we have the whole mobility situation around the world, as seen by Apple. But this also affects how we are doing DevRel and how people are behaving. And we can compare this data, the general mobility, with what's happening in our field. So instead of looking at mobility data, I was also looking at Meetup. I'm collecting every Meetup RSVP in real time. I still have to write a blog post sharing how to collect all this data and how you can use it. But what's interesting here in this chart is that I'm looking at the countries that have the most meetups, and you can compare with the two colors. This year versus last year, the numbers of RSVPs. And you can see that the United States, back in March, it quickly dropped to half of the RSVPs that Meetup used to receive daily. You can see how every country is behaving in a different way. Singapore is really interesting. Like, it had a big drop after the rest of the countries did. Then it had a comeback, and now it's going down. The gap in July for last year is because I'm just missing a week of data from last year. And what's also interesting, every country is interesting in itself. But Hong Kong is back to normal. New Zealand had a big drop, and now it's back to normal. There are different ways of handling the pandemic, and you might know that from the news. Now, that's not all. Now a lot of people are using Meetup online. We are doing this event online. I was scheduled to do this in Tokyo, but now I'm doing this at home. Here you can find out what percentage of RSVPs to Meetup are for online events. And you can see that the US not only dropped to half of the RSVPs for Meetup events. Now, half of those RSVPs during July are for online events. In England, that's 60%. And what I find really, really interesting, if you go to Brazil, even though Brazil is going out according to Apple's data, uh, on Meetup, people that have access to Meetup and that are RSVPing to it for events, 90% of them are staying at home. So you can see that there is a difference between the general population and people interested in events. Brazil, even though it's the country that's going out the most in South America, it still has one of the largest people percentage of people staying at home for events. And then I started looking at different things. Like, for example, if you look at since April 2020, what are the top online meetup groups? Well, the online top meetup groups, and of course, they're most doing their stuff online. And you can see that the group that has seen the most number of different people, unique people joining their events, with 240 events, is UT Dallas Computer Science Outreach, followed by Data Plus AI Online Meetups, Silicon Valley Data Science, ML AI Platform. Number 4, Women Who Code SF. Number 5, the Talicians. They do a lot of ML, Bitcoin. And in number 6, that's a very cool one for me. That's Live with Google Cloud Developer Relations. And that's a meetup group that I started with my teammate Yufeng. And we started this because Yufeng was doing a lot of live streams. I joined his live streams. More teammates have joined. And we started a group out of nowhere because we needed a place to put our stuff together. And suddenly we are the 6th group in the US by number of people joining it. At the same time, this is really interesting if for wherever your field is within DevRel. The question is, what meetups should you contact? What topics are trending? You can use data like this to go around the world and see who is listening, what topics are working. And not only this, I could, instead of only finding the top groups, I can find the top events. And again, these are the top 15 events by a number of people that have RSVP to the event since April 2020 in the US for the developer topics. Look at that. Number 1 is my own event. I organized that one with Yufeng too. That was to celebrate BigQuery's 10th birthday. And I'm super proud to show that, well, we have the top event. In terms of metrics, this is a really cool thing to show internally. How do I tell to my manager and the rest of the company that what we're doing as DevRel has value and that we are getting engagement? Well, I can show them that we got the event with the most RSVPs in the US for developer meetups. And you can see other topics like a lot of them are related to data and ML. Probably that's going super hot on Meetup right now. But for example, number 15 is about Django. There's a lot that you can do here. And one fun thing about online events, they are not capped by a number of people anymore. It's not like normal events that you have a cap of how many people you can fit in a room. Let me change topics. This talk is about different data sets that you can use. I showed you already Meetup. Let's look a little bit about Stack Overflow. And this is a blog post that I published last week. Here I'm looking at the percentage of views that each tag is getting quarter by quarter. Part of the fun here is that I'm not looking only at historical data. I'm using BigQuery and Arima predictions, time series predictions, to look at where the trends are going. And you can see here that Python is eating the world. It's the only language growing like crazy. Like JavaScript is holding its ground, and Java is just going down in the percentage of attention it's getting. And thanks to my ability to project time series into the future, you can see what are the top 10 tags of 2023 if the current trends continue. And you can see that there are 2 tags that are not on the top right now, but they are growing really, really fast, which are React.js and Angular. Of course, when you present charts like this on Twitter, a lot of people get angry, especially when you show them what are the languages that are going down, which are like Java, C#, PHP, Ruby, Objective-C, Perl. Those are losing attention. People don't like when you tell them that, but that happens. On languages that are gaining attention, on the top right chart, you can see that TypeScript, Dart, Laravel is not a language, so I should take that out. Go, Kotlin, AppScript, and Rust. And yeah, the highest growth language, the biggest trend right now, if you had to pay attention to one, it might be Dart. Dart is a language to pay attention to. Again, I'm using all of these data sets. I'm sharing real time, or almost in real time. I'm taking the pulse of what's happening around the world. And the good news is that you can use these data sets too. And now this is a part of the talk where it's going to get a little crazy, because I have like 7 minutes to present 50 more slides. But this is all about how do I share with you in 20 minutes what kind of data sets you can use to see what's happening around the world, understand your company, etc. The next slides are from a conference I was invited last year to talk at. This is Linaro Connect in Bangkok. A lot of people around the world go to this conference. This is a conference about the ARM processor and what this company is doing with open source. What do I know about the ARM processor? Not much. Why would they invite me to give a keynote at their conference? That's because I can take all of my data sets and present a story that's about them. What I want to share you in the next few minutes is what kind of stories you can tell using these data sets for your company. How can I go into any other conference of any community and just look at their data and share what's important for them? So what I did in this talk was, okay, first I tell people that there's a lot of data. GitHub has a lot of data, and I have a lot of GitHub inside BigQuery, hence I can start analyzing it. There's data, I can answer questions like, for example, spaces versus tabs. Do people use spaces or tabs? Well, I got my results. I'm going to skip really fast over this. Turns out a lot of people prefer spaces to tabs, except in Go. And there's so many other questions that you can look at if you're looking at GitHub. And of course, GitHub is relevant for DevRel. For example, you can look at the top countries using GitHub, or by per capita, or what happens when it's cold versus it's hot. I don't have time to stop right now here, but please engage me on Twitter. What companies are contributing to open source? I did this in 2018, 2017. I need to update the chart for 2020, but you can see that Google and Microsoft in this chart are the companies contributing the most in number of projects, number of stars, number of people inside. This is what the open source environment looks like. And then that's one data set. But you can go beyond GitHub. I already showed you a little bit of Stack Overflow, Hacker. I'm also looking at Hacker News. I'm looking at Reddit. A lot of what we do happens in Hacker News. Wikipedia is also a really, really cool place to look at, because a lot of people go to Wikipedia to understand new concepts. I can even look, for example, at data sets like the Python installs. Like every time someone does an app gets installed, I'm getting a ping of that data. There is a full data set, and you can see how things change. Let me show you, for example, stories about ARM using these data sets. This is the ARM webpage, and Linaro is a company I gave this keynote to, and Gong Li is an actress. It turns out that their CEO is Li Gong, who's a computer scientist, and they love this joke because turns out their two Wikipedia pages exist. You can use Wikipedia. A query like this, a little bit of SQL will show you how all of these pages are trending through time. And yes, ARM architecture gets a lot more page views than Linaro. Li Gong, computer scientist, the CEO, you can see how they started getting page views once they joined Linaro. And of course, there you have also Gong Li, the actress, just to compare. Even for Wikipedia, you can see how people are clicking from page to page. So, for example, when people land on the ARM architecture page, what do they look next? Or, for example, you can see where do they come from. When they land on the Li Gong computer scientist page, where were they coming from? A lot of them were coming from the Gong Li page, the actors, and they just were interesting in the data scientists. And this is a lot of Wikipedia. Hacker News, having the whole of Hacker News inside BigQuery is awesome. If you want to see how topics trend around developers, hackers, the story of Redis was really told via Hacker News. That's where it was first presented and it got popular. And I'm not telling that story today because, I'm at an ARM conference. I will tell stories about ARM. So, for example, I can find the first ARM stories in Hacker News. And what are the ones that got the most votes and how the interest has been flowing. Same with Stack Overflow. What were the first questions for ARM? Or even more interesting, what are the top Stack Overflow questions for ARM? And if you look at the pages for each question, it will tell you what's happening around your technology, what are people interested in. What's the top question for ARM? How does it differ from x86? What's the second one? Someone is not finding an ARM command. And you should go look at what's the data for your company, for your products, and fix those questions. And then every question trends different through time. We can look at that too. I wrote a blog post. I can share it later. Let me finish in the last few minutes. For example, let's look at how people are installing Python packages. What Python packages are more interesting? Now, if you go to an ARM conference, you may want to show what are the top downloads for ARM CPUs. These are where the top downloads. But what's even more interesting, if you go and start wrangling your data and looking how it changes through time and how you find what are the most interesting patterns depending on your criteria. For example, here I'm normalizing and I'm looking at the different systems installing it instead of just looking at raw numbers. This will tell you that the top packages in Python for ARM are tcupdate, RPI, AutoBreadcrumbs, the Google Assistant library, Adafruit. And it shows you people are using ARM and Python a lot for mobile devices. And of course, I'm going back to GitHub. On GitHub, you can look at all of the issues around every package. So for example, here I'm looking at all the issues around GitHub that have the tag ARM. And you can see like, these are the projects that care about this. And you can look further than your project. You can look at all projects and see who is mentioning your technology. In my last minute, I can show you how Hacker News and Linaro were part of the conversation and what was more important. And all of this is to tell you that there's a lot of data. A lot of these data sets are already shared. The only thing you need to do is create a BigQuery account. It's free. You don't need a credit card. And I love sharing with you this kind of insights. But the most important part is how you can use these data sets to drive your conversation. I didn't have time today to go into other data sets that are really important, like on the private side. You can get all of YouTube, the YouTube analytics inside BigQuery, and you can analyze how your videos are doing. You can get also your own Google Analytics inside BigQuery and join that data with the rest of your data sets and create a 360 view of what's happening. Check my blog post where you can find out how to use BigQuery without a credit card. And I think with that, my time is gone.